Spec intro. Hey there, welcome. This is Tim Mahoney with the Being Mahoney Special Edition podcast. We had a show like this a few weeks back featuring the Grateful Dead. We're talking about the 50th anniversary. It was about the Chicago shows coming up. And now we have our favorite guest back, Chad Whitaker. Say what's up to the peeps.
Yo, hey.
Hey. And John, I don't know if I say your last name right. Eichten. Both of them, John was at the 3 shows in Chicago. Chad was at home by himself watching them on a 80-inch screen.
Oh,
no,
you were there.
I know. I'm just kidding. So we're just going to start with basically just a review. All you people out there listening, Deadheads, even if you're not a Deadhead, the one thing we're trying to do is just learn about this band, learn about the phenomenon, and just learn about different things that they do and how this whole, they're calling it Fare Thee Well. Will it be the end? We'll get to that at the end. Do we think it is the end? But we're basically just going to go through each show a little bit and talk about our expectations, what we liked. I did watch 1.5 of the shows, so I definitely got to sample it. But I'm going to talk to these guys. We're going to start with the first night, guys. So this was the night that I did get to watch with my friend and bass player Chad. And immediately I thought, which I've already heard from John, of course, just the energy. We were just watching it at home, but you could just feel it. It just seemed really special. Couple things right off the top. We talked about them, the song they started with. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Let's just talk about their first song. Did you expect that? Chad, you go first.
Well, obviously, Box of Rain was, I thought, an interesting choice because that was the last song that they ever played with Jerry. Their last show with Jerry at Soldier Field. They did, I believe, Black Muddy River for an encore, and at that point of their career, they never did 2 encores. And for some reason, Phil just, at the end of Black Muddy River, broke into Box of Rain. And, some people say, and I think you said it too, that he thought maybe he saw something coming. He knew Jerry wasn't doing that well, and maybe that was his kind of way of talking to him or whatever. So I thought it was interesting to play it as the first song, at the 50.
Right. So it surprised you a little bit, but you could kind of see it when you thought about it, maybe thinking of Jerry.
Yeah.
John, your thoughts on that first song?
I'd say that about 85% of the people in the stadium in Soldier Field knew that was the last song that was played.
Okay.
And the people were absolutely screaming. It was so exciting.
Really?
Yeah, it was, there was, of course, a lot of people there that had probably never seen them because they were too young. But for all of us that were there or at least were big Deadheads back then and like me, were at the final show with Jerry, it was quite the moment.
We've talked to Spec on, we always say, I remember it was with your wife, Chad, Phil, no, don't sing, because people talk. Just as a spectator, I've just hated those comments. What do you guys think of that stuff? I know people say because his voice is, but I mean, I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool because Chad was talking to me about kind of what he just said there, how cool they're playing Box of Rain. And I wasn't really thinking about, wow, is his voice really awesome or really shitty? I was just like, this is just cool. Did you guys agree with that? Or
I totally agree. It was kind of like what Chad and I agreed with last time about the band's going to do what they're going to do, and it's not up to us to say whether or not they should be doing that or not, really, in the end.
Yeah.
Band members do what they do, and that's why they do it. So, or we'll never know why they did it, but I thought his singing was fine. I had no arguments with it, and I thought that song was very appropriate to start off, really set the tone for a great weekend of shows.
Yep. Chad?
I don't have a problem with Phil. I think that there are some songs that he sang better than others. Some songs he sounded good on. Excuse me. I think actually Birdsong he sounded pretty good singing on, and other songs he didn't, but I don't really care too much. I mean, it was just cool to see them all playing together again. And
The big thing we were talking about was the celebration. I mean, that's a word that came to mind to me is, yes, we're watching these concerts, but because of the magnitude of the Grateful Dead and just everything about it, to me, it was more than the notes played. Now, that's just my feeling, maybe as an outsider, that this is more than how perfectly song is ever played, or it's about a celebration of maybe remembering and thinking of, well, of course, Jerry, but just the band in general. That was me. So now I'm gonna go into just really quickly with that show. Both of you take a couple minutes on surprise song choices. I know Chad had a couple that just freaked him out. Well, not freak him out. I just mean,
oh my God.
Yes, it was that. We got that. Oh my God. And I always want to know why that is. How about you, John? So, John, why don't you start this one? First night show song choices that you were just like, oh, I can't believe they're doing that one.
Well, I'm not. I would go more like I have a hard time answering that one. I was more excited that Bertha came up as song 3.
Okay.
That one was very exciting, and then I was really excited to hear The Wheel, which came up as song 5, and that had basically everyone singing, Phil, Bob, Trey, and Bruce, and I thought that from a collective standpoint, that really set the stage for the rest of the shows, that they were... It was going to get even more intense as the show went on, and I'll leave 8 to you, but I was pretty surprised about Mason's Children, but New Potato Caboose, I was excited to hear because that was a stalwart in the '95 tour, and then the encore just blew me and everyone else away that they did Ripple as the encore.
Yeah. Right.
I really thought Ripple would come on
last night.
I was very surprised when it came.
Chad, you did it. I know one of yours was New Potato Caboose. I remember that one really, but what were the ones?
Well, Mason's Children obviously I was like, what? like it took me a minute because I think if I remember right, they started that set. They kind of just jammed for a little bit, and then they started going in. I was like, are they doing Mason's Children? It was like a song that they recorded for Working Man's Dead, but didn't make it onto the album. And they barely played it live.
Right. Like barely the length of it, or just barely ever?
They played it a few times, like in late '69, early '70, and then they just never really played it again.
Right. About the Ripple ending, we talked about the magic of the beginning of the show. It was no secret to see and hear the crowd screaming and the magic when Ripple came about. We knew that at home a little bit, but John, what was the feeling out in the crowd when Ripple started? Was it, I mean, for me, Chad talked a lot about Ripple being connected a lot, so much to Jerry. Did you feel that? What did you feel being there?
Very much so. I heard complaints on July 4th about, they're not doing enough to commemorate Jerry. They're not saying Jerry. They didn't say anything about his. They didn't say his name or anything. He was flipping everywhere.
Yeah.
He was on every other shirt. He was in the videos. He was every time they showed, every 5th picture was Jerry Garcia. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Jerry Garcia.
Right.
So he was definitely there. So as far as Ripple is concerned, it was, I think it surprised. I mean, it just blew me away. I was speechless. But I also noticed that there were a lot of other people, longtime Deadheads, that were just.
Did you know it when Bob
literally
had the
in shock.
acoustic guitar? Because I know when he came down, remember didn't he strum a chord for some little? Did you know it was going to be Ripple?
No, it could have been El Paso.
Yeah,
it could have been.
it could have been a lot of other things.
Because that's me as an outsider. Because I don't know all the acoustics, but for me, right away, I was like, maybe it's Ripple, But that's just me. I have no experience in it.
The way that the first night had gone, I was almost certain it was going to come night 3. Based on what they had played previous, and so I think all the people that I talked to afterwards, we all had the same sort of wow.
Yeah.
How about the singing? Like, were people just I suppose, just singing along? I mean, it must have been just like almost. Could you not even hear the stage? Just because I could just picture everybody singing every word. You know.
Yeah,
like,
the crowd was louder than the band members at one point in time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
You know, I should say too that it's great. You know, and there's nothing better than being at the show. But some of that stuff like Ripple, and there are certain times during the 3 nights, even just sitting home doing couch tour, where you could feel the vibe of, you know, of the shows coming through, you know, your TV even, where
we did.
Yeah.
I know. I kind of did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember there were some people at my house that started tearing up in certain songs. And
There was, yeah, definitely. And I think that I'm starting to understand that more, especially with that song and then the choice of that. Let's quickly jump. Now we're going to go night 2, Chicago. Let's talk about the set list. Of course, this is 4th of July. We started with Shakedown Street. What are you guys' thoughts on the intro of that? How they started the set? Chad, why don't you start on this one?
well, actually, I missed that first song because we had a show that day, and I raced home.
Okay.
And I
knew that.
I turned it on right at the end of Shakedown. So that's the only song from the 3 nights that I missed.
But you did go back and watch it.
Yeah, I did, of course. But just the song, I haven't watched the shows repeatedly like you've accused me of doing.
Oh, that's okay.
But I did go back.
I think your wife just said, I asked her if you're going to watch them again. She goes, oh, yes, they will be.
Yeah.
So more about, forget about seeing it or not, but just them starting with Shakedown. John, want to hit on that? You were there.
I was totally excited. It's one of my all-time favorites, and it really set the tone that things were going to be super exciting.
There aren't many better show openers.
No.
Really.
No.
And how often have they done? I mean, not hot. You know, Shakedown Street.
It's a fairly often
common opener.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about which I've heard? You know, just reading stuff. Friend of the Devil, obviously from American Beauty. A lot of those songs, you know, the songs when we think of more the layman, someone like me that we recognize. Do you always expect those or not necessarily?
I think most of these songs people were expecting, but what maybe threw people off was that they didn't do them in the normal order that they used to in the old days. I mean, you would never see like, what was it, the first night they did Let It Grow near the end of set 2. It's like that never happens.
Right.
You know, and Shakedown Street, yeah, that's a fitting opener, but you know, having Little Red Rooster or Friend of the Devil near the end of the first set is a little bit weird.
Having Liberty and Standing on the Moon second and third.
Right. Yeah.
Night 2 was like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Who do you think was the most instrumental in song choice? Now, I'm sure it was everybody discussing, but who do you think was most instrumental in deciding that stuff? Just opinions.
I would say probably Bob and Phil have the most say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Bob and Phil.
They seem to be running the show. Maybe Phil even just a smidge more than Bob.
Do you think Trey had any say, or just as a fan? I don't know, maybe.
Probably. Maybe, I mean, he probably was just so happy to be doing it that he just...
Right. And then we can also just quickly touch on that. Happy to be doing that. Wow. I mean, Trey looked like a kid as a 14-year-old in this candy store.
Absolutely.
And that
just smiled for 3 days.
That
straight.
also just showed the excitement to fans. I think it also maybe showed someone at home going, wait a minute, Trey's a big rock star. He's in a very, very big band. And look at him in awe of this thing. And you see him playing in awe. That was cool for me because you definitely got the vibe like he is there out of respect. And he is by no way there to showcase him. He's like, I'm here because I believe in this stuff. I followed it. What are your guys' quick thoughts on Trey? And
I would say that like the first night where our seats were didn't really matter. I think a lot of people kind of ended up in the same situation that I personally was in, that when we got into the stadium, because of the way that the security let everybody in, and it was a good thing that they kind of held the show back a few minutes to allow people to get into their seats. So once we got into any seat sort of thing and we're looking up at the screens, it turned out we couldn't really see their faces, but it didn't matter because once they were up on the big screen and it was literally Trey Anastasio's grin that led everyone out on the stage. Yeah. And from that moment on, it was like, this is going to be even better than I thought, because Trey Anastasio has the biggest smile I've ever seen.
I feel like he's going to almost get, not that he didn't have before, but I feel like he's almost going to get not necessarily a new fan, but just more respect, even from his own and new people just going, wow, this guy's a real guy. I don't know that he didn't before, but what do you think on that, Chad?
Well, Phish's summer tour is starting a little late because of this year, and I think you're going to see a lot more sold out Phish shows. I think people are going to go want to, kind of catch the bug and go see Phish.
Right. Huh. Okay, cool. Let's go on a couple things more on set or show 2. On set 2, you talked about Birdsong, Chad. Why don't you talk about that?
That was just one of my favorite jams.
That's just it?
Yeah, and Phil sang. That was probably, I think, one of the best songs Phil sang. And the jam was just great. They were all locked in and taking it to the same place, which is hard to do.
True.
So a couple of things I would point out that I thought were really interesting, and you guys as musicians can fill me in on this, but I thought it was really cool how multiple lead singing went on, especially between Trey and Phil on multiple songs, including Deal, and then Cumberland Blues. They did that. I mean, every night it seemed like 2, if not even 3, like Tennessee Jed, 3, 4 of them were singing on. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, there were a lot of
really
songs
good
where
harmonies
they
together.
all kind of took a verse. Bruce, got in on some of those too.
Yeah, it was cool to hear Deal close out the first set of night 2.
Yeah.
The Fade Away, which I just got to give my own little props to, because of course it's a Buddy Holly song, and I'm a huge Buddy Holly fan. And that was another thing that I got turned on. Someone had told me, did you know the Dead have done that for years? And do you guys know how that happened? How they ended up? When did they first start doing that?
You're talking about
Not Fade Away?
You're talking about Not Fade Away from night 3, though, right?
Wait, I'm sorry. No.
Well, there's West LA Fade Away. That's night 2.
Yes.
And
I'm
then
sorry.
Not Fade Away, which
See,
is
this
the
is
Buddy
when you're
Holly
not
song.
a total expert. You know the difference between Fade Away and Not Fade Away. So I'm sorry. That's West LA Fade Away.
West LA Fade Away, I would say, though, from being there was really cool.
Was it?
Because that, at the end of Jerry's life, was one of the songs that he played often, and he played with vigor.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I thought the band really kind of put an oomph into that. It was a rockin' song on night 2.
Yeah. What about just even up till then? We got Drums in Space, which of course I've learned a lot about that, especially because I will note this past week I did read Phil Lesch's book. What's it titled, Chad?
Searching for the Sound?
Yeah, which just got me, as someone who's just learning so much about him, it got me definitely a lot more up to speed on a lot of things, like the section Drums in Space that happens at every show. How did you think those went, like from night 1 and night 2? Changing a lot? Cool, what you expected?
Yeah, all 3 nights were very different, and I've never been a massive Drum Space fan. I mean, when they're touring and they play it every night on tour, to me, it wasn't as big of a deal. But now that they're just doing it these 3 nights, I was really interested to watch it, and there was some really interesting things happening during all 3 of them, especially the last night, I think. Really, like, you could almost tell this was going to be their last drums ever or whatever, and they really did some really cool stuff. I mean, it really drew me in. I couldn't really tell you exactly what it was. I just remember really being drawn into it and watching everything that they were doing.
How much do you think that's improvised, the Drums in Space?
I think they have a rough sketch. I read in books somewhere, I don't know if they always did this, but there were times where Billy and Mickey would just go back in a room and light up, and just the 2 of them, and just go over some things and come up with some stuff to do that night.
And maybe just for the people out there who are not Extreme Dead fans, Drum Space, if you were to just describe it in a few sentences, what is it? It's a section in the show that...
Well, starting from about the maybe early to mid 80s up until the end, there was always a section in set 2 of their shows that in the middle they do Drums in Space. So they usually do like 2 or 3 songs to start out set 2, maybe 4 if they're really feeling like they want to, whatever. And the songs generally set to segue right into the next song. There's no real stops usually, and they'll go out of a song into drums, and then there'll be a drum solo, and everybody leaves the stage except the 2 drummers, and it'll maybe like anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, and then the band members start to kind of come back on stage one by one, and then the drummers leave the stage to take a break, and then they just kind of noodle and improvise, and that's called space. So it's always a section in the middle of set 2 that's drums and space, which they did keep kind of on these shows. It was always kind of in the middle of set 2.
Right.
And I thought it was really interesting that on the first night they did the traditional Fire on the Mountain going into drums and space. The second night was Foolish Heart going into drums and space, which seems to me very out of the ordinary, keeping with the fact that they were playing songs very much out of order, like Birdsong and then into The Golden Road. Mm-hmm. But on night 3, they did Terrapin going into drums and space, which is kind of what everyone was predicting.
Yeah.
Everyone kept saying Terrapin. I mean, like, people were yelling out those 3 as a combo.
Because they wanted it or because they've seen it so much?
Because they wanted it.
Okay.
And we were predicting it was going to happen, and then it did.
And in the old days, Terrapin usually came right before drums and space.
Exactly.
Anyways.
Yep.
So.
How about the closer, U.S. Blues, on night 2? How was that, John, being there live?
Great, completely predictable. We all knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially when
that's funny. I didn't even think about, because it's the 4th. I didn't even think about
when One More Saturday Night was the closing song. We
so
knew.
what? I might have missed some inside stuff there. You said, of course, because it's the 4th.
4th of July.
U.S. Blues. You're just saying because it's U.S. and Independence.
Yeah.
Okay.
So pretty much every 90% of the people probably that know the Grateful Dead knew that One More Saturday Night, it was either going to be the opening song, or it was going to be the closing song, or it was going to be the encore. And then when it ended up being the closing song, we knew U.S. Blues was going to close.
It's like they have to play.
I mean, if not, there was going to be 2 songs.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good stuff. We're going to move quickly on here to night 3 in Chicago. Of course, this is the Sunday show. What people always say, of course, we talked a little bit about last time. You said never miss a Sunday show. Let's hit on that just for a second. Why do you not miss a Sunday show? I mean, me as a musician is going to, of course, say all the obvious things like, oh, because it's going to be crazy, I'm going to do something different. Is that really just it? Or what is the don't miss Sunday show thing?
Well, it also stems from the fact that you never want to miss a tour closer.
Okay.
And that, for all intents and purposes, unless, the predictions come true, they don't, they do have more shows, but that was, in a sense, that was the end. So that was the show not to miss. And I think that was the hottest, either that or Friday was the hottest ticket. That's what everybody wanted. So you just know that they're going to pull out all stops. They're probably going to stretch themselves a little bit, and then also they're going to play songs that you really want to hear, and maybe some songs that were completely unpredictable, which they definitely did.
One other thing too, if like an example, and I know Fish and the Dead aren't the same, but it's the same kind of theory with the Sunday show thing, because I went to see the Halloween run last Halloween. That was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Same thing. Don't miss the Sunday show. I think part of it is a lot of people just head home Sunday and they skip that show because they have to go back to work on Monday or whatever. And again, just like this show, I mean, Sunday was probably the best night of the 3 if you take out the Halloween set.
Right.
From Halloween.
Yeah, and I've seen about 6 Fish tours where I was able to see the Sunday show, and the Sunday show is always better than the other 2 or 3 that I've seen in the run.
And then looking at this Sunday show, which, like you said, were, for intents and purposes, they were calling it could be the end of the tour. Let's just maybe, instead of me picking songs, have each go on a little bit. What made this the best night, Chad, for you? What made it feel? What song choices? What they played? Stuff like that.
China Rider opener was great. That's usually a set 2 opener, so that was. I mean, you kind of went, oh, they mean business, because they're starting out with that.
Absolutely.
Built to Last, I actually got a new appreciation for after seeing the show. It's one of their newer songs. It's on their last studio album called Built to Last. I think it came out in '89. And then also my friend Brad Ray will be the witness, but Mountains of the Moon, they jammed they did just like a 3-minute jam before they went into it. And I called it right away. I was like, is this Mountains of the Moon?
Just because of the same key, or
I don't know exactly how. There was I was trying to guess, and something must have popped out and grabbed me, and I was like, that's Mountains of the Moon. And Brad's like, what? They wouldn't play that because it was a really old song.
But a lot of times it's not what they do sometimes, right? They might hover on an intro jam, and there could just be a hint of a note, and then that hint becomes a little bit more apparent till the hint becomes then that phrase which begins that song.
These 3 shows, and actually 5 shows, they really did that a lot. Really tease you and try to keep you guessing. Where in the older days, that with Jerry, they didn't do it as much. They just went boom, and they're in the song, usually. But they had a lot of guessing, like intro jams, like people purposely, I think, so people go, what is this?
Yeah. How about you, John, on just the overall saying, the best show, the energy, the song choices, the playing on the Sunday night?
If I can't hear Sugar Magnolia, I want to hear China Cat Sunflower going into I Know You Rider.
Okay.
But never, ever had I predicted it would have been songs 1 and 2.
Okay.
And like Chad was saying, they meant business. And it was, people were jumping up and down, screaming. Nobody could believe that they started off the show with that. Now, we all predicted it would come set 2, probably maybe even the opener, but not the first 2 songs. And I agree with Built to Last. That was good. Samson and Delilah was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was good.
Even Throwing Stones, I really enjoyed. The whole first set, beginning to end, Estimated Profit was really good. So the first set, they were rocking. It was like, wow, what else can they play?
And then, to my mistake earlier, the Buddy Holly song, not Fade Away. I just have a question. When did they start playing that Buddy Holly song?
69, probably.
Yeah. So
they actually played it in the early, like when they were first starting out, like 66.
So right after it came out, then.
Yeah. Not long. I think they learned it because they liked the Pigpen liked the Stones. I'm pretty sure that's how they started playing it. But then the famous Dead version is their second live album. Yeah, I think it's a second live album, 1971, called Grateful Dead. They paired it. It's not Fade Away. It goes right into Going Down the Road Feeling Bad. And that's kind of the version most people are. That's what the first version of the Dead they hear first, before anything else.
That's the one that everybody's familiar with.
Yeah.
And then it leaves me too at the last song. It's funny. My friend and producer here, Aaron, we were making jokes before you guys came, and he goes, "What could I say to those guys that would offend them the most about the Dead?" And I said, "Well, that's a funny take on it." I said something like, "Jerry's overrated," or I said, "Play Touch of Grey."
Yeah.
And one,
like that song.
Tell me why. Is it just because it was the only song that charted for them?
No, it was the first song that started off the last night of the 95, the July 9th show, the last show with Jerry Garcia.
Okay, so you're saying...
So we all knew... Well, we didn't all know 100%, but I was 90% certain we were going to hear it night 3.
Okay.
In Chicago.
And are you guys fans of the song?
I love the song.
Yeah,
I've
love
always,
the song.
It's funny when I hear it, I don't think of it, though, as a Dead song as much as it's just one of those many songs I grew up with or when I was younger. It just reminds me of the 80s. I could hear that right next to, Pet Shop Boys or something.
And for me, I was hearing it before they actually put it on record. I was hearing it live and always enjoyed it and wondered whether or not that was going to be one of the songs that made the new album at the time.
They played it for like 5 years before they even recorded it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what record was that song on, Touch of Grey?
In the Dark.
In the Dark.
It came out in 87.
Okay. To close up the shows a little bit, we talked earlier, John, when you got here. You just said the magic, of course, everybody coming in Chicago, all the clubs and bars, just that turned into Grateful Dead Central. Maybe just hit on that a little bit, what it was like to be around. You said, which one thing I thought was cool is just people just seemed really happy.
Mm-hmm. Even the airport. I mean, flying. We flew out of Minneapolis into Chicago O'Hare, and Minneapolis was just full of Grateful Dead T-shirts and other concert T-shirts, and Minneapolis St. Paul is obviously a hub, so it wasn't just Delta. It was United and every other airline that was there, but there was hundreds, if not 1,000 people who were wearing some sort of concert, paraphernalia. And I thought, wow, this is really impressive and everything, until we got into O'Hare. And then O'Hare was absolutely a sea of Deadheads.
Right.
And they were saying, well, this is nothing. You should have been here yesterday. Because I guess Thursday, it was as far as the eye could see, tie-dyes and everything. So that was really cool. And, as the song says, people stopping strangers just to shake their hand. That was exactly the vibe that was everywhere.
That's
What's
from
that
Scarlet Begonias.
Okay.
Can I ask? I want to ask
please.
a question, actually. When you were at the shows, did you get any feeling that there were a lot of people there that weren't really Deadheads? A lot of people were talking about that before the shows, like, oh, all these people are buying the tickets for hundreds of dollars and they're not even really Deadheads.
Not really, because the amount of T-shirts. One of the things I was most impressed about is that I was in my 20 years ago, in terms of body size, was a long time ago. So I can't wear any of the T-shirts that I had, but I was so impressed of how many people, especially people in their 50s and 60s, that were wearing T-shirts that I actually have in my closet that I can no longer wear. And
Tim, you'd be in heaven.
And they were everywhere. And it was just. It was intense. I mean, you walk around a corner, you walk into the bathroom at the hotel, you walk into the elevator. I mean, concert T-shirts from the 80s and 90s were everywhere. Didn't see a lot from the 70s, but a lot from the 80s and 90s shows that I was at.
I did go to eBay. Did you know some of the first Grateful Dead shirts on eBay in the 70s are going for like $200 to $900.
Ooh.
And there's only, I believe I only saw
How many
2.
did you buy?
Well, I love vintage
I wonder
shirts.
if my size larges can...
But it's funny, the original ones are just, they're very, to me, it's funny, if you saw them, I mean, you would know, but it's just the basic logo, right? Because that's the beginning. But... So if you just look at it, but obviously you'd have to know and you trust that, see that it's an old shirt. And
well, if Peter Shapiro, as rumor has it, announces more shows, maybe my old T-shirt collection I can no longer wear will fund my new.
There you go.
The new shows I want to go to.
There you go. That's a good one. Good stuff on the shows. All the shows, of course, is going to be available. I've been seeing all the promos for, of course, the whole box set, audio, video. What is that, this fall they said it's coming out? They said this fall it's coming out, the audio, video set for everything for these Chicago shows. Mixing them, do you think, when are those coming out? No, that's not the box set you talked about. We're talking about just the Chicago shows, that stuff coming out.
I don't know if they have a date. Maybe they do. I just don't remember.
Okay.
But you could pre-order it. I mean, I think months ago it was like $175 for like the CD set of all 3 nights, and DVDs or Blu-rays of the shows.
And I saw an announcement, I think just yesterday, that their online store for the official concert merchandise is up as of yesterday.
Okay. Wow.
Ah. Okay.
Or maybe it debuted on Friday.
check
Anyway,
that
I saw
out.
it. Yes, I saw it over the weekend.
It's interesting how smart they are, right? Don't put it up before. It's like make sure, get everything you can at the event, and then put it after.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Quickly jump on the new box set, since we're talking about purchases that Chad pulled the trigger on, that is coming out or came out, and tell us about that.
to celebrate the 50 years, they put together this box set. It's 80 CDs, and it's one complete show from every year from 1966 through 1995.
And like you said, if you're a Deadhead, arguably you may have every one of these things already, or these shows.
I've heard 2/3 of them probably.
Okay.
On bootlegs. You can go to archive.org and stream anything for free.
So my question then is, what are you getting that you don't?
Well, I'm kind of an audio snob, and Jeffrey Norman is kind of one of my heroes because he does all the mastering for these archive releases. And you listen to a show on archive, and then you hear what he does with it, and it's just amazing how good he can get these sounding. Some people don't like it; they say that he scrubs them too hard. But I don't agree with that. I think he's very careful with what he does and not to do anything too crazy with them.
What do you get? Any other thing like with the box set special? I don't know.
It comes with a
unreleased
book.
Pictures, or I'm always thinking.
I think it comes with a book. It said like a 270 something page book, and then it also comes with a 45, which actually you'd find this interesting. It's a 45, and the first side has a song called Caution, Do Not Stop on Tracks. It's one of their very first songs that they recorded, and it's a demo they did in 1965, right at the end when they first got together. And the B-side is Box of Rain Live, which was the last song of that last show with Jerry. So it was like a bookends to the whole set. It's like,
wow,
That's
cool. It actually is a 45.
What's that?
It actually is a 45.
Yep, it's a 45. It's like a gold-colored 45, I think.
And will that be available digitally then as well, you think?
I think it will be eventually. You can buy the CD box set, or you can also order, I think it's the same price, you can order a flash drive with everything on it.
Okay.
And I think it ships in like mid-September, like September 18th or something. And they're only making 6,500 copies, and that's why I actually pulled the trigger. I heard that they were almost sold out, and I was like, I better buy it.
That doesn't even seem like that many, does it? When you think about...
It's expensive, though.
Well, I guess I just think of how many people are Deadhead fans. Are you getting it, John, or you'll probably just get it from Chad?
It's illegal to burn those things.
I won't. I won't be. To be honest with you, I have so much music. I don't have time to listen to it all.
Right.
It would be nice, but I know that I'll buy the 5 shows. And definitely the 3 that I was at, the Chicago shows, and I can probably listen to those for a while. Keep me happy.
Cool. Well, we're going to segue a little bit into here. I had a cool meeting last week. I was playing a show at a mountain bike opening hill in Detroit Lakes, and met a guy named Gary Fisher. Well, if you're in the mountain biking world. Turns out he's a pretty big deal. He started the mountain bike and mountain biking. His first company was called Mountain Bikes, and he designed it and everything. Then he kind of sold the rights to Trek and design. He's been with Trek for 30-something years. Very cool guy. We immediately hit it off. We ended up talking for about 2.5 hours at Zorba's in Detroit Lakes. Ironically, not about bikes because I'm not a big mountain biker, which I told him. But we talked about music because Gary was in San Fran. That's where he lives. That's where he lived back in the Haight-Ashbury days. And I got some audio that I recorded of him talking about the Grateful Dead. Remember, he lived... What he told me was he, lived in the house, knew Janice, knew Jerry, knew Bob. And here's just some comments from him. We're going to listen to this audio, and why don't you guys take a listen.
They didn't have hit records, right? And that's the way bands in those days made money. They were like, but they could tour, and they could make money, and they could keep going. And they were in a total anomaly. And all the other bands that made all the money off of the records, well, they went and toured and they treated their customers like shit. And the Grateful Dead respected them. I mean, think about it. They let the tapers tape. You want to do it? Go ahead and do it, man. We want you to have a cool time. We want you to have a good time. And the other bands were like, hey, you know what? we're doing you a big favor by showing up.
Right.
And the Dead treated people with respect.
Sorry about that. Hit pause for a second. Interesting, though. He's talking about, respect, that he treated people with respect. The Dead did.
Bruce, who was a bike racer, and he had a recording studio in San Francisco.
Listen to it here.
He
again.
got the the Grateful Dead, and the Quicksilver Messenger Service to do this gig, and so we show up at the Ferry Building, and the Dead in the airplane, or the Dead in the, not airplane, I keep saying it, the Dead in the are in cars, convertibles, and we're all on bikes. And we start at the Ferry Building. We go to the City Hall. We get the key from the mayor. We all ride bikes down to Redwood City, We get the key from the mayor there, and then we go do this gig. And the gig was, there was a bike race called the Tour Del Mar, and they played at the IDES Hall in Pescadero, California. And I'll tell you, it was a beautiful place. It's still there. And there's a big, huge straw flower field out and back, and everything was beautiful. You go back there and have fun and stuff, and then go back into the concert and everything. And I met Girl from Quicksilver, David Freiberg's wife, and oh man. And I met the Garcia and the band and, Mountain Girl. They're all there. And it was like, man, they played 3 nights, and 100 people showed up total.
Wow.
But we had a great time, It was like a good time. So I got got kicked out of bike
It's
racing.
like the Mahoney show.
Yeah,
That's not that funny. You don't have to laugh that out.
There was at least 100 people.
Well,
Fine.
So, what about you said about Garcia, something with a joint? You met him and he rolled a joint or something? Or?
no, he's taught me how to roll a J because I didn't know how to do it. I was a kid.
Right.
So right then and there.
How much younger would you be roughly than those guys? They're
I
all
was-
born, mid-40s?
Me? I was.
No, they're born in the mid-40s.
Yeah, I was born in 1950.
Okay, so you're about 7 years younger than those
Right.
guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of them.
And you said you still are friends with Mountain Girl.
Yeah.
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 And how is that relationship, or how did you?
We haven't got it yet.
She's like.
We ordered one. We haven't
She's
got
really excited right now because, they went through a bunch of stuff, with that crazy, all the stuff with Deborah,
Yeah.
right? Crazy, and she's got these kids and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And she's super excited right now because she's realizing, and, like you were, like those guys can stay alive by telling about the story. I mean, I tell Mountain Girl, you and your children are like the relics in the church. You know what I'm saying?
Right now, you telling this stuff is going to make my podcast way more popular.
No, it's
because people like to know real facts from real people that were there. So yeah, you can hear Gary. Of course, we're in a
Jerry.
loud bar.
Yeah. Jerry, they refer to as Uncle John sometimes. All right.
Okay. This little thing about
And,
Jerry.
within the band.
Yeah.
And it's like that guy, and it's that old thing. It's like the way he played all the time was like, in a way, you thought this is a stumbling drunk. He's fucking blowing it. He's leaping off the edge here, and then the miracle would happen. That it would get tossed into something that would go like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And he did it continuously, and it was amazing. And I truly miss his playing. What can I?
So yeah, that's just some comments. I'm going to ask you about a couple of things he said in there. Some of it seems rambling, but we talked a lot. But right there about Jerry's playing, we talked about how his style of jamming, of educated jamming, how he kind of would jump in his thing, you wouldn't know where he's going, but then there'd be that we call the peak, right? The peak moment. You'd be like, oh man, that was where they were ending up or going, or they just got there. This is something I learned a little bit about Phil talking about his book. Can you guys talk a little bit about that, about what he was talking about? Chad?
Well, Jerry, I think, led a lot of those peaks. That's just a part of the jam where they're doing some improv, and there's a point where it's kind of almost tension and release. They're building and building and building, and they just hit a peak, and they all, hit like max volume, or Jerry hits a certain note, and that's just like basically the part of the song where it makes everybody just go, yeah,
Right. Yep.
And that's.
And then how about the other stuff he was talking about there, which he of course, I just want to keep it going along, but I knew he was telling me stuff that I didn't exactly know the backstory on, because he currently, Gary Fisher does still have a relationship with Mountain Girl, but he said she's excited, but he brought up somebody, which you pointed to Chad on that. What was that information?
Basically, Jerry Garcia's last wife, or wife at the time of his death, Deborah Coons, who has been slightly controversial.
Right. I assume in the financial stuff and who writes, and I mean, I don't know.
It sounds like she. It sounds like, not to put words in anyone's mouth, but it sounds like at the time of his death, or just before, he changed some items in his will, and no one really knows why or how it all happened. And instead of, each child getting like fair share or something, it sounds like the children they had together got way more than other ones, and it's caused there's been a lot of negativity, but I don't know all the specifics.
Right.
I heard even a story about when Jerry died and he was cremated, and they were going to throw his ashes out. They were going to go out. Was it San Francisco Bay, or they were somewhere out on the water? I don't remember
they were
where.
somewhere out on the water.
It must have been San Francisco, because the boat was just about to leave, and Mountain Girl showed up or something, and I guess they, like, Deborah was just like, wouldn't even let her get on the boat.
You can't come along and that sort of stuff. So
how was their relationship though when he died? His first wife,
whose?
Mountain Girl.
Oh, Mountain Girl and Jerry.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
I don't really know.
That's not a.
That was. I should have asked Gary that, because although being out on the tour, me playing, like Chad knows, we meet a lot of crazy people full of shit. But I can tell you, this Gary Fisher guy is totally legit, and you can just tell he was just telling me about these stories, very passionate, and that's probably why he kept talking. We didn't talk about bikes, we talked about the dead, and he showed me pictures of Hendrix and all kinds of stuff, which leads me into next thing. I said I've been listening to the book, the Phil Lesh book, which wow, it just brought me so many unique things. Learning about Phil is the biggest one, just how educated, people step aside and we talk about the dead and we think smoking pot and these jam bands and this stuff. Well, listening to Phil dictate this book, I mean, he sounds like a PhD as far as describing it, because he's talking about the style that he played bass was a style of bass that catered essentially to Jerry's playing, and that was how it was designed, which even as a musician, how the way he plays, the roots and kind of will go around the chords a little bit. That's very fascinating. I'll get some points from you on that. And then also just what Jerry meant to him. And I told this to Chad the other night, is one quote that Phil said. He goes, "Jerry was my drug, and I was going to have as much as I could of it." And I thought, what a powerful thing to say about another person, even who, of course, we know is being self-destructive, but you really found out, learning about the glue of the band being Jerry. That was one other thing I learned a lot. By the way, I want you to comment on all this stuff. And then the other thing I learned about was Pigpen's role. I did not realize how big his role was and how big a stamp it had on them as people and as a band, and how Phil talks about his first time out on stage, that he's never been nervous except that moment. He was just like, there was just a massive hole, and he arguably said there always was a hole after Pigpen. And why don't you guys comment on just those few things I said? John, why don't you go?
Well, I'm going to echo what Chad said in the previous one about Pigpen he was kind of the de facto leader initially, kind of stepping out. He was the one who actually could sing and at least was trained to sing and could, in a sense, they could all really play, but I guess he was more the classically trained one from my understanding.
Well, he was kind of the showman,
Yeah.
like the other guys kind of just turned to the side, looked at each other and stuff, but Pigpen was the one that was actually engaging. If anyone was engaging, it would be him.
Yep.
Bob's quote was, Pigpen was the musician in the band. I think that was from the book that Phil said.
And then they were also saying, like, each had their role. Billy was pretty much in the background, as was Bobby initially. Jerry played a mean guitar, and it was all about Pigpen.
Chad?
Bob actually got kicked out of the band for a short time. So did Pigpen in the late 60s.
They mentioned that, because they weren't contributing enough, or
they weren't keeping up with the vision that Jerry and Phil had. I mean, Pigpen was no question the leader. 60 when they first started, 65, 66, 67. By 68, they started working on really out there stuff with a lot of changes, a lot of weird things. Like New Potato Caboose is a perfect example of a song that there isn't really a chorus. It's just like a few different sections of the song and it's over. Well, apparently Pigpen couldn't really keep up with the changes on that because he's just a blues guy. He just wants to play, GDC and whatever. So his role as leader got diminished as the 60s came to a close. But then they worked all that out, and in the early 70s, at the end of the Pigpen stuff, they kind of did their thing, but then they always had a little section of the show where they had Pigpen would come out and do Love Light for a half hour, or Good Lovin' for 45 minutes or whatever.
I was interested too to know one of their first songs that they played or jammed was the Pickett song.
In the Midnight Hour.
Yeah. And I thought that was their standard, always their go-to.
They were an R&B band really when they first started, and it's just that no one really ever decided that the song was over, and I think that's and these people were dancing, so why are we going to stop? Let's just keep going.
And I think that's something I learned in the book is, just the playing, the touring. I mean, it's like they were just always touring, constantly playing. I mean, you learn so much in this book about all their debts and how they didn't really care about that stuff. They had multiple managers, from Bob's dad to stealing to another guy stealing.
Oh, Mickey's dad.
Mickey's dad. Yeah. Sorry, and that they kind of pushed that stuff aside and really didn't care. Now, why that's so cool, and maybe you could say not cool. It's cool for starters because it's about the music, right? I mean, nowadays that's the first thing people are worried about. Like, let me make my buck, let me make every percentage. I mean, these guys truly, and into a fairly modern age. I mean, even the 80s, just didn't really give a shit. I mean, they're kind of like someone would go, you know what, you're massively in debt. They go, all right, cool, let's go tour, I guess, let's start, multiple labels. They were talking about starting these labels that they put out those side projects. They started one, then they started a second one. Yeah. I mean, now I'm just thinking I'm a business entrepreneur guy. I mean, I'm not saying it all was stupid. It just means that some pretty bold things that they did, but kind of just didn't care. And there was some beauty in that I saw.
They did care. They didn't care, but they partly did care too, because the reason why they made Working Man's Dead and American Beauty is because they wanted to go in the studio and record quickly and not rack up any more debt to Warner Brothers.
Right.
They were going in that folk direction anyway, but the fact that they were in debt, I think, really pushed them to go. Was really what made them go and make those albums, and it's like arguably two of their best albums they ever made in the studio. But yeah, they didn't really care. They just wanted to play music, and they wanted to do it the way that they wanted to do it. And back in the 60s, people at Warner Brothers, like Joe Smith and those guys, they just, it was so polarized, and they couldn't understand, what do they mean they don't care if they have a hit record? Well, why are they on the record label,
Right. Or their deals, they talk about getting unlimited studio time, of course, not knowing at the beginning that you have to recoup all those costs.
You have to pay for it, eventually.
But then, they want to make things at their own pace, and
they want to learn how the recording studio works.
Right. And of course, obviously the technology, they talked about that, the levels, which was so small then. He's like, then we moved on to the, big 16-track channel. And of course, now we think, you can use unlimited tracks to record stuff. But did you read that book, or have you heard anything about it? Or
I've just heard it's really good and can't wait.
Probably a lot of stuff.
It's really good.
Probably a lot of stuff, some people would already know. I liked it just because it gave mini little bios about everybody, and then Phil himself. I just really loved that I just won't listen to them the same now, because it does seem a little bit more thought out than when you aesthetically listen to it as a musician. You would go, well, this song is 2 chords, yes, but Phil actually went into a lot of more complicated things about time signatures, which there's 10 minutes in the book. He talked about time signatures, and if I'm playing in 7, and Chad we were talking about, and this is stuff that, again, actually got to a point it was hard for me to understand as a musician, and I'm still thinking this is a jam band that people would look at and go, what are they doing? There's nothing big deal they're doing. They're just playing a couple chords and noodling around. Well, turns out it wasn't that. And it really was Bob's style of playing. He said, well, if Jerry's not there, how do I play bass? Because I'm playing around. I learned to play bass. Literally, I didn't play bass, which I didn't know that. And I learned to play bass to play with Jerry. What are your comments on that, John?
I was going to say, well, more from the perspective of I've heard interviews with all of them, and it's very interesting to me that you found him to be so intellectually interesting. I've always thought, of course, that Jerry Garcia's interviews are very interesting. But the first interview that I heard with Phil, probably in about 85, 86, just blew me away from a high-level intelligence standpoint. He sounds like a PhD talking. And his voice notwithstanding, he's just so interesting to listen to. So I'm excited about the book.
Cool. We're going to get a couple last things in here. We're going to end with a little note you passed over to me. We're going to end with that. I'm going to just touch on a little bit of the future here. I picked up this article, which is a lot of stuff, of course, post the Dead shows. What's going to happen next? The drummer Bill said, everybody heard that right away, that, I don't want to stop, or let's do more.
We got to play the East Coast. Man.
Right. Okay, he said we got to play the East Coast. Well, now Trixie Garcia, I'm reading this thing, says there will be more events. There's no one looking at all these this is a quote. There will be more events. There's no one looking at all those 70,000 people and thinking it's not going to happen again in some shape or form. Obviously, with the exact same lineup, I highly doubt it, but we'll see. I want your comments on that. My initial comment is, and I don't mean that just it's capitalism just to make the money, but of course people do see that it does have a massive celebration following. Now, should that continue again? I mean, that's going to be opinions for everybody. I'm not sure if I'm educated enough in all the stuff to give that. I want your thoughts on that stuff of the future. And do you want to see more? If it's different, should it be called the same? What is it? What would Jerry want? I mean, we don't know that, but let's get our opinions out here. Put yourself out on a limb, stand on it, and say what you think. Chad.
I don't know if it's going to happen again. I would give it 50-50. I mean, I know that within the band, I know there's a couple people who definitely want to keep going. And I think there's a couple people who maybe don't really want. They said this was it. This was our final shows. Let's let it be our final shows. Just let it be. If it did happen again, I think it'd be great. I'd consider maybe going to see it if it was, made sense to do so. And depending on who, like you said, who is in it, I don't know. Trixie said it wouldn't be the same lineup or something, or it might not be the same lineup.
Said probably not. She continued to say there's a feeling that our fan base wouldn't be served if there was no more events. Uh-huh. So I think it's pretty obvious to everybody there wants to be more shows. But I feel like that also could just mean...
Is that the core 4 or not, though?
Well, that also... I also feel like that could be more of like a... There could just be like celebration events. Like maybe there's... It's not even... I mean, it could just be an audio concert with a Grateful Dead celebration. I don't know.
Or
what I mean? Or we're playing exact shows at a venue. I don't know. I'm just trying to go off the top of my head, but I see, because then they said, or if the true rumors are true about John Mayer, like a full scale tour thing. Which, John, why don't you give some thoughts about the future?
So today there was an announcement. Peter Shapiro, who produced the shows, the Fare Thee Well shows, was quoted as saying that they are exploring a possibility actually with the Core 4. But to be honest with you, after seeing 3, I think there'd have to be a major break in between Fish's touring plans for it to be including Trey, and I don't really want to see that happening, to be honest with you. I'd rather see Trey continue on with Fish.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that.
Then again, too, there was the rumor of if it's Phil that doesn't want to tour because he's contractually obligated to a bunch of events, I guess, at Terrapin. There's the possibility that part of Fish could actually move into the Grateful Dead and play, and that would kind of be rather interesting. Both Gordo and Trey playing, which would be really interesting. But again, I think it's all far-fetched. The thing that I see having the most validity is John Mayer was at all the shows in Chicago. He was everywhere. He was all over social media. If it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen with him as the guitarist, and one or more of the core four won't be playing.
Yeah, and will that have the same thing? Maybe yes, no. I don't know.
I don't think it'll have quite the same impact if it's not the core four.
I think it'll have a little
fairly
bit.
Well, so it's kind of like, how do you go from there to it not? And if it's not the same people, then
I think it's similar to the fact that they announced the 3 shows in Chicago, and as Peter tried to say, it's a living, breathing thing that we can't stop, and they're adding everything. They added behind the stage, they added side of stage seating, they added video, they added all this stuff in addition to what they originally announced, and I don't think any of that stuff was planned. So who knows what could happen?
Yeah.
Well, it's been good stuff. I want to end on our last thing here. We're going to actually kind of cap off where we started. We're going to talk about the second encore of the last show, and that, of course, is "Addicts of My Life" from American Beauty, which we're going to play here to close out. To me, one of the most emotional songs besides "Ripple." Maybe both of you touch on that song choice. John, touch on being there. Again, the feeling of Jerry being there, that stuff.
The one thing I would say is that there was a lot of speculation at the end. Touch of Grey, is this the end? Are they not going to do another one? Are they going to come out again? And then when they did come out and they did do Addicts of My Life, I think there was a lot of questioning, surprise. I mean, I was as blown away as anybody else. The fact that I was glad that they didn't end it on Touch of Grey, the first song from the final Jerry show. I thought that they all stopped playing and then sang, I thought was really a touching moment.
Well, I can see that in your eyes, and that's what this stuff is about. It
was super intense.
Yeah. Did you?
Still gives me goosebumps.
Well, I can see it. I assume people in the crowd the same thing, right?
Oh,
I'm sure a lot of tears.
It was insane. Yeah.
Do you think the tears were, and not to put emphasis, that has to always be emphasis of tears, but was it just a combination of Jerry, the end, or do you even feel it was more, even to yourself, was it more Jerry? Is it the end? I don't know.
Well, Jerry was all over the video and stuff. I mean, they didn't have to say his name at the end. Like I was saying, he was everywhere. He was omnipresent.
Yeah.
But the fact that was the song that they chose, and there was a lot of speculation as to what was the song going to be. But the fact that they could all come out and sing it, and I just thought it was a really neat, a song that's only been done 52 times live.
Yeah.
Then again, too, Ripple's only been done like 42 or something. But still, the fact that they've only done that song 52 times live,
52.
and that's what they ended on, I thought was a very touching moment.
Chad?
Yeah, I thought, did they do Broke Down Palace?
They did that in.
Did they do it in
Santa
California?
Clara.
Okay, yeah, I thought so. Okay, I guess I forgot about that. I figured it was. I think I saw him come out with acoustic. Bob played, or just
Yep.
one of them played acoustic. Yeah,
Yep.
and I was like, okay, it's probably going to be Addicts, or I was thinking maybe Broke Down, but I didn't go back and look and see that they already played it. So I thought it was a perfect song to end on, if it is in fact the end.
Right. Well, we're gonna actually we're gonna play that to end. This is actually live from the concert in Chicago. Tune into our show. Our show's going to be changing a little bit. It's going to hopefully always feature Chad and then John also, and myself. We're going to be taking in new members. We are going to be making our own name to the show, and it's going to have its own site. And we're going to be doing it. We're going to start a little soft and be doing it monthly. We may do it more often if the audience listens. But if you like it, please share. If you want to be on the show, email timmahoneymusic@gmail.com. If you got thoughts about the Dead, any new stuff, we're pretty much open to all conversations. I think that's what this thing is about, is getting all opinions, always learning more, always listening to more deep tracks, finding out what we liked, why we liked it, why we didn't like all the stages, learning more about the people in the band, and I'm just learning more daily, so it's just been a cool thing. So thank you guys for coming on again, John and Chad. Again, our new show will probably be on. We'll do another one in a few weeks, but we're going to end here with Grateful Dead, Addicts of My Life, Chicago 7/5/2015. Thanks for listening, guys. That's Addicts in My Life, Chicago 7/5. Let's hope it's not the end, but one thing is for sure, we are going to continue doing these podcasts. So stay tuned and share this one if you like it to other people. Email again, timmahoneymusic@gmail.com if you want to be on the Grateful Dead Right Now show. We're going to give it an actual unique name. We're just thinking of that. So if you have ideas for the name of the show, send that to me. And we'll talk soon. Thank you, guys.